Pain flared through Logan Pierce's ribs as he pressed his back against the jagged rock. Blood seeped through the fabric of his tactical suit, sticky and warm against his skin. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. His muscles ached from exertion, yet his mind remained cold and calculated. Somewhere in the dense alien jungle, movement rustled the thick, bioluminescent vegetation. His pursuers were closing in. The mission had gone to hell. Within minutes, the 6-man SEAL team had been deployed to VX-9, a barren, war-ravaged planet deep in contested space. Intel had suggested a covert Zerin installation, possibly a weapons cache or research facility. Standard infiltration, grab and go, they'd done that 100 times before, but the Zerin knew they were coming. Logan had seen the first flash of energy fire from the ridgeline, his squadmate Coleman crumpling without a sound. Then another blast took out Rodriguez, his body spinning from the impact before disappearing into the darkness. Logan barely had time to shout a warning before the entire jungle erupted in a dazzling display of alien gunfire. 3 minutes. That was all it took for the SEALs to be reduced to one man, and now they were hunting him. A low, unnatural hum reverberated through the jungle as Zerin search drones, sleek, insectoid forms, hovered just above the treetops, sweeping the area with pulsating beams of light. Logan exhaled slowly. He had only 2 rounds left in his rifle and a combat knife strapped to his thigh. Hardly ideal, but he'd survived worse. A shadow passed over him. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone. He tensed, then the jungle exploded. Something massive slammed into him from behind, sending him sprawling forward. His rifle skidded across the damp ground. His fingers barely brushed the grip before a crushing weight pinned his chest to the dirt. A sharp, cold pressure pressed against the base of his skull. A weapon, or perhaps a restraining device. "You fought well, human," a deep, guttural voice, tinged with a mechanical resonance, rumbled above him. Logan's fingers twitched toward his knife. A second, smoother voice interrupted, "Don't we both know how this ends?" His knife was yanked away, and in the next moment, something sharp jabbed into his neck. A burst of electricity tore through his nervous system. Agony flooded his limbs as his body convulsed in violent spasms. His vision blurred. He heard cold, human laughter, and then darkness swallowed him whole. Consciousness returned in jagged, disorienting fragments. Cold metal beneath his body, the heavy press of restraints digging into his wrists, and a faint hum, the sound of a ship's engine far below. Logan's eyes fluttered open. He was in a cell. Dim, pulsating red lights lined the ceiling, casting eerie shadows across the steel walls. The air was thick with the scent of oil and something resembling blood. Logan flexed his hands, testing the restraints. Metal cuffs reinforced with some kind of energy field, with no immediate weak points. A low snarl cut through the silence. Across the cell, slumped against the opposite wall, was another prisoner. An alien, though not Zerin. A tall, lean figure with deep-set obsidian eyes and skin like cracked stone, a species Logan didn't recognize. The creature's breathing was ragged, its chest rising and falling in uneven spurts. "You should not have fought it," it wheezed. Logan studied it silently. Then came a slow, grim chuckle. "The Zerin don't keep prisoners, they keep specimens. You will be studied, and when they are done, you will be discarded." Logan filed the information away. His mind already worked through the possibilities. The Zerin were warlike yet pragmatic. If they kept him alive, they needed something from him: information, leverage. A heavy clang echoed through the corridor. Footsteps, multiple sets. The cell door hissed open, and 3 figures entered. They were taller than humans, their bodies clad in smooth black exo-armor pulsing with green energy. Their faces were elongated, skull-like, with dark, sunken eyes faintly glowing beneath their helmets. The central figure, distinguished by ornate armor traced with silver etchings, was a commander. He approached, stopping just short of Logan's restraints. "You were different from the others," he stated. Logan remained silent. A slow, predatory smile curled on the Zerin's thin lips. "Your team screamed, 'You did not!'" the commander continued after crouching to study him like an exotic creature in a cage. "We have encountered human soldiers before, most of them soft, weak. You, though, were something else." His eyes narrowed. "We recovered your tactical gear. It had a skull on it. You bear a name," he added, One that made some of my men uneasy. Logan's expression remained impassive. The Zerin's voice dropped to a near whisper. Reaper. Silence stretched between them, thick as a blade's edge. For the first time, Logan allowed himself a smile. The commander stiffened. Logan could see the unease creeping behind those cold black eyes. A classified file in their intelligence network had made his blood run cold. Perhaps it was his confirmed kill count, or the covert operations his team had executed deep behind enemy lines, or maybe the horrifying realization that this wasn't a prisoner capture, it was a mistake. Logan leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. Now you understand. The commander's mask of confidence wavered for a fraction of a second, and that was all Logan needed. The commander straightened his jaw, then turned sharply, issuing a command to the guards in his native tongue. The restraints around Logan's wrists tightened, sending a surge of electricity through his body. He clenched his jaw against the pain, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. You will talk, Reaper, the commander said, his voice even colder. Eventually, Logan exhaled slowly, his muscles flexing against the restraints. They didn't know what they had brought aboard their ship, but they would soon find out. As the door shut, Logan closed his eyes. He would wait, he would plan, and when the time was right, he would hunt. Logan remained motionless, his breathing slow and controlled. The cell was silent now, save for the distant, rhythmic hum of the Chiron warship's engines. He listened, every sound, every vibration, every shift in the air. He wasn't just waiting, he was learning. The guards returned sporadically, their armored boots echoing through the corridor. They never spoke in his presence, but Logan caught glimpses of hesitation in their posture, the way their hands hovered near their weapons, despite their rigid discipline. Fear, subtle but present, had taken root. The name Reaper had done something to them, good. The Zerin believed in control. Their military hierarchy was absolute, their soldiers methodical, precise, devoid of emotion. But fear was like a crack in tempered glass, a weakness that spread, growing deeper and more dangerous until it shattered everything. All Logan had to do was widen that fracture. He let himself sag against the restraints, exhaling slowly. Deliberate fatigue was real. His body was battered, his muscles burned, but exhaustion, wielded like a weapon, would lower their guard. And when it did, he would remind them why his name was feared. Time blurred in the dim, sterile glow of the ship. Logan noticed that the alien across from him hadn't moved in a while. He could hear its shallow, weakening breaths, a creature that had already accepted death. That wasn't Logan. The cell door opened once more, and the Zerin commander stepped inside, his armored form casting jagged shadows along the walls. The guards flanked him, rifles at the ready, but their movements were stiff and uncertain. Logan kept his head lowered, offering no reaction. The commander studied him for a long moment, then spoke, "Humans are more fragile than legend suggests." Logan let silence stretch, allowing the words to settle. The commander sought a response, but none came. Then, a sharp burst of pain tore through Logan's body as an energy rod slammed into his side. His muscles locked as a white-hot current burned through every nerve ending. He swallowed the scream that fought to escape. Pain was nothing. He'd endured worse. The commander crouched before him, tilting his head. "Your silence is impressive, but ultimately pointless. You will break, Reaper." Logan's lips curled just slightly, enough to convey defiance. "I won't need to." The commander's expression remained unchanged, but a flicker of doubt appeared in his eyes, a shadow of uncertainty. Logan let the smirk linger before dropping his head again. "Make them think you're slipping. Make them think you're unraveling." Abruptly, the commander stood, turned to the guards, and issued a command in his native tongue. Logan caught only fragments, but the message was clear: keep him weak, but alive. They still needed something from him. That meant they wouldn't expect what came next. As the guards moved to follow the commander out, one lingered at the door. Logan didn't look up, but he could feel the soldier's stare, the look that crawled under the skin, full of unease and doubt. Logan inhaled just loud enough for the Zerin to hear, then whispered, "You can feel it, can't you?" The guard stiffened. Slowly, Logan lifted his head, his eyes locking onto the alien's dark, recessed gaze. "This ship isn't safe anymore." The Zerin's fingers twitched near the grip of his weapon. Logan tilted his head and lowered his voice to a near murmur. "Something's watching in the walls, in the dark." He let the words slither out like a secret, like a whispered confession. "You know what they call me? Reaper. Do you know why?" After a pause, he continued, "Because I don't need a weapon. I don't even need to move." His voice, barely audible, was laced with an unsettling edge that made even the guard recoil. "Death follows me," the guard managed before backing away. The door hissed shut behind him, leaving Logan alone once more. That was the first seed, now to be nurtured over the coming days, or what passed for days aboard the ship. Logan observed the rotation of the guards, the security measures, and the weaknesses in their patterns. More importantly, he listened. Whispers began as muted voices in the corridor, Zerin soldiers speaking in hushed tones, spreading rumors. One guard, a lower-ranking soldier named Ruthless, refused to stand near Logan's cell anymore. Another, Threx, began glancing over his shoulder even when the halls were empty. Fear was growing. When the lights flickered, a momentary glitch in the ship's power grid, one guard reacted as if it were an omen. Logan caught a brief flash of panic in his eyes. It was working. Then the moment presented itself, a shift change. New guards, unfamiliar with the protocols, the perfect kind of careless. Logan waited until the door slid open and the guard stepped inside. He let his body go slack, his breathing shallow, his eyelids fluttering. The guard hesitated, then moved closer. In an instant, Logan's hands snapped up, chains be damned. He twisted his wrists, forcing the energy cuffs against each other just the right way. The field shorted for a second, just long enough. His fist slammed into the guard's throat. The Zerin staggered, choking on a strangled gasp. Logan was already moving. He twisted the alien's arm behind him, grabbed the sidearm from the soldier's belt, and shoved him forward. The Zerin crumpled unconscious before hitting the ground. Logan exhaled silently and quickly searched the guard's body, finding a key card. Without hesitation, he tucked the card into his sleeve, pressed himself against the wall, and listened. No alarms, no signs of notice. Perfect. He had one chance. If he botched this, there wouldn't be a second. He swiped the key card, and the cell door whispered open. Stepping into the corridor, he noted that the lights pulsed in a steady rhythm overhead and the low thrum of the warship systems vibrated beneath his boots. No alarms, no shouts, yet he moved like a shadow, staying in the blind spots of the security cameras, listening for approaching footsteps. The Zerin were taller, but not as fast. They weren't trained for this kind of war. Reaching an intersection, he paused as a distant murmur of voices echoed from down the hall. The command deck, no engineering, the heart of the ship. A smile played on his lips. A heart could be stopped. He gripped the stolen weapon tighter. This wasn't an escape anymore. It was a hunt. The corridor was silent except for the steady hum of the ship's energy core deep within its structure. Logan moved like a wraith, his breathing measured and his grip steady on the stolen Zerin sidearm. The alien weapon felt unnatural in his hands. Too light, too smooth. But a gun was a gun, and he would make it work. He had no armor, no team, no backup, just his instincts and a plan. The air carried the scent of burning metal, faint but distinct like power conduits. Though the Zerin had emergency systems, the ship's infrastructure was still organic in design, interconnected like a living thing. A well-placed wound could cripple it. His escape no longer mattered. They had taken his team, his brothers. They had assumed he was just another prisoner. They were about to learn what it meant to cage a predator. A footstep echoed down the hall. Logan slipped into the shadows, pressing himself against the metallic wall as two Zerin soldiers rounded the corner. Their armor gleamed under the dim light, and their weapons were at the ready. They were tense, aware something was wrong. It thrummed with power, its steady rhythm like the heartbeat of the ship. Logan slipped inside. No guards were in sight. He scanned the room, spotting the cooling conduits. If he could disrupt them, the core would overheat. Then a voice spoke behind him. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, human." Logan turned slowly. Commander Vexer stood at the entrance, flanked by two guards. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. His hand hovered over the energy blade at his waist. Logan smiled. You should have killed me when you had the chance. Vexor studied him. You are not what I expected. Logan tilted his head, both disappointed and impressed. Vexor, few beings have escaped Zerin captivity. Fewer still have unmade my men the way you have. Vexor took a slow step forward. But this ends now. Logan flexed his grip on the rifle. Not for me. Vexor lunged. The commander was faster than any of his subordinates. His blade sang through the air, aimed for Logan's throat. Logan dropped low, pivoting as the energy blade slashed past his head, searing the air. He drove his elbow into Vexor's ribs, forcing the alien back. The guards raised their weapons, but Logan grabbed Vexor and twisted, using him as a shield. The guards hesitated, too slow. With a swift motion, Logan tore the blade from Vexor's belt and plunged it into the alien's gut. Vexor gasped, choking on his own breath, and the guards faltered. That was all Logan needed. He fired twice, dropping both guards before they could recover. Vexor staggered, blood pooling from his wound, his black eyes locking onto Logan. You are a monster, he managed to say. Logan yanked the blade free. I'm human. Vexor fell. Logan turned back to the reactor and activated the explosive charge. The coolant conduit ruptured with a violent hiss as steam vented into the chamber. The ship's power core flickered and destabilized. Alarms shifted from warnings to death knells. Without looking back, Logan sprinted through the corridors as the ship lurched violently, the power flickering, the walls shuddering as systems failed, and voices shouted in panic. The once methodical Zerin forces were breaking. Reaching the hangar, where Zerin fighters lined the bay, he picked the closest one and slid into its unfamiliar cockpit. A guard shouted from behind, but Logan silenced him with a single shot. He scanned the controls. Though the Zerin script was unreadable, he pressed what looked like the ignition. The fighter roared to life, and the hangar doors loomed ahead. He punched the throttle. The fighter lurched forward, breaking free of the bay just as the Zerin warship convulsed in its final, dying spasms. Logan didn't look back. He had a transmission to send. The war had just become personal. Stars streamed past the cockpit as Logan gunned the fighter's thrusters, leaving the crippled warship behind. He didn't look back to watch it die. The ship's power core was failing, its coolant hemorrhaging from ruptured conduits. It wouldn't explode immediately, but it was a dead husk drifting through the void. Logan exhaled, forcing his muscles to relax. The adrenaline still burned through him. The sharp edge of survival pulsed in his veins. His hands ached from gripping the stolen controls, his body bruised and battered from the gauntlet he had endured. But he was still here, alive, and the Zerin were bleeding for what they'd done. He angled the fighter away from the battlefield and scanned for signs of pursuit. No immediate threats. The Zerin were too busy dying to chase him. He had time. Logan adjusted the comms, sifting through encrypted frequencies until he found what he was looking for. A relay station orbiting a dead planet not far from this sector. It wasn't much, but it was enough. With sheer stubbornness and military ingenuity, he patched in and overrode the alien controls. The transmission crackled to life. Command, this is Reaper. Repeat, this is Reaper. His voice was steady and cold, confident that the message would set off alarms the moment it reached the right ears. After a pause, a voice spoke, Human, Reaper, this is Fleet Command. You're supposed to be dead. Logan smirked. I get that a lot. Confirm ID, Logan Pierce. Serial number 876 to 244.